this was a very valuable building because, you know, in this generation, we think of grocery stores as these enormous. They weren't. They were much smaller, and the others were smaller than that.
Right.
And were corner stores and so on. So if you needed, if you had a real deal on perishables, and particularly of meat,
Mm-hmm.
you couldn't put it in your own place.
Right.
So the railroad actually drove into the building.
Yeah.
Which
Right. You can see that
That's
still.
one of the challenges of demolishing.
Yeah.
Right.
Then you would unload it.
Yeah.
And then you would have a reserve space where you could have whatever it is that you had purchased and then draw down from it.
Okay. So citizens would use it, or was it grocery stores?
No,
It was, so the stores themselves would then have space inside the warehouse so they can come and get it. Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
It'd be more the wholesale end of things.
Right.
Whereas you and I would go into the retail.
Right. Okay. Yes, that makes sense.
Whatever arrangement was made.
Right. Oh,
It's a
they're
bit-
good
yeah,
to
it's
come to
a
there.
great memory. Because there it is. So I probably consulted this website
Yeah.
when I was writing that.
People valued the building. I mean, I remember City Hall had a fire in the mid-70s, and the fire was put out, but a lot of material was wet by the firemen's hoses. And I went down to Mayor Corning, and I said, I don't know what to do. Oh, he says, send it right away to the central warehouse and freeze them, and then you work on
Right.
restoring them.
Yeah.
Like, what a great facility.
Right. So useful. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably not that common. Like you said, there's only.
There are two of them. I think these were built by the same company. And
So that one was 27. Was the Central Warehouse the same year?
27 also.
So they were built at the same exact
Yeah, I
time.
think
Yeah.
they were built by the same company at the same time.
Interesting.
The whole skyline of Albany changed in the 20s. It was very, very prosperous. And a lot of the big bank buildings that we like are from the 20s.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah, 1927, as a matter of fact. I think the Corner Estate and Pearl and 11 North Pearl are both 1927. So there's a lot going on.
Right. Right before
Yeah.
everything crashed.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Like
I used to tell people that the downtown of my father was the same downtown that I had, because nothing happened by comparison.
Right.
Between the Depression and then the war.
Yep. You weren't building anything, right? Everything was already there.
Worried
Yeah.
more about housing because you had all the troops coming back and so on. So it wasn't until the 60s that you began to see things going.
Right.
Watch
These are
downtown Chum.
world. Totally different.
Like the 30-year void.
Right.
Which is nice. Mercer is sometimes not being
Yeah. Right.
for preservation.
Well,
for preservation.
it's true.
Mercer
Well,
is-
it was built back then, as you know, it was built to last, right? It was built,
Yeah, I think that's one of the issues with this building.
Yeah.
Right now.
Hmm.
Yeah. So.
because it was built that way.
Yeah.
Right,
Oh yeah.
yeah.
I mean, it's going to be interesting to watch it.
Yeah.
Because it's pretty much indestructible.
Right. And they're anticipating a little less than a year, I think.
Yeah,
About
about
a
26.
12-month, 10 to 12 month process.
Listening to NPR, and the county executive was quoted, and the governor was quoted. I don't know who else was there, but at one point, I think Danny McCoy said something about it should be all done and ready for development early in 27.
Okay.
So that
Biden.
and then to me, why so long? I said, because first you have to take care of the asbestos.
Yeah.
I think that's been done. Hasn't it?
I thought it had been done too, but then today, for what they said today, it sounded like it hadn't been done. Yeah, because I thought that when the owner, the Redburn guys, I thought they had come in and they were working on that, but I think they saw it and stopped that because from what I heard, because from what was said today, it sounded like that's still part of the deal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that'll definitely extend the time.
Yeah. Right. Because you mentioned the side and the floors and what it was used for. Like that was obviously the magic stuff back then.
And it's not just concrete; it's reinforced concrete
Yeah.
with lots of metal in
Mhm.
there holding it together.
Yeah. You been inside?
No.
No.
Neither have I.
Yeah.
I know there was a fire.
Mhm.
I don't know how long ago, but the last 20 years, I
Yeah,
guess.
there's also cork, which I didn't realize.
Yeah, the floors, I think that must have something to do with the, nature of the storage or something. I
Right.
think, because I've
Yeah.
heard of cork floors in other buildings of that type. So what do you want from me, Tom?
I mean, you're doing great so far. I'm already learning something. We're just rolling along.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the way we roll, I guess.
So what? I know. I guess. I think that's a really good comparison to see how that became what it is
Yeah.
in Canada compared to what this became.
Yeah.
Was it just neglect, and ownership that just didn't invest in? Because you said how valuable it was,
That
right?
was a lot of it.
Yeah.
First of all, it had a use,
Hmm.
and the use went away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the little corner grocery stores, and a 10,000 was considered a big grocery store. Today, it'd be much, much larger.
Yeah.
And they have their own facilities, and it became obsolete.
Yeah, and I think, if to put that in a larger perspective, I mean, you think about just the nature of so many things has changed, like not only shopping, but having places like this, multi-story too, probably. I think if you had, like, look at those warehouses out in the Mohawk Valley or, Skodak or whatever, those are like one-story,
Right.
huge single floor, or maybe, I don't know, maybe they have 2 stories, but that is a whole different thing.
Oxford County over
What's that?
off Route 9. It's
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
famous Walmart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you go out Route 20, what is that one?
And nothing is second floor.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Everything is just
A lot of land.
right. It just takes up a lot. It's a lot of.
If you spread this
yeah.
out,
Right.
it would be
Yeah,
a lot of land.
what
And
did
could
that square footage say?
I mean, there's a lot of efficiency in this building too. The fact that it's how many stores is it? Stories is it?
It's I don't know, but it's 46,000 per floor and 500,000 altogether. So that's 10, 11 maybe. That sounds like about 11 stories.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
I mean, think about what 500,000 square feet in this congested area would look like.
Would it be the end of the entire neighborhood?
Yeah.
One story.
Right. Yeah. It would take up all this.
Yeah.
Into the canal and everything like that.
It's what block is it? This block, I guess. Yeah, Montgomery's on the So it's this block. Take that, and but it's probably at least all of that.
Wow.
So, and you can see that it was sited in a very industrial part of town, and in the urban renewal period in the late 50s, early 60s, all of this was wiped out. I guess, was it North Ferry? Yeah, here's the railroad overpass. So this is all gone, and this was replaced with small-scale industrial commercial buildings that are all 1 or 2 stories at the most.
Okay.
And so it's kind of still hanging out, and I'm sure Schaefer Brewery was still. I mean, that closed, I think, in 71.
Yeah, that was
And
it.
that was
70.
here.
And Boardman's was built. That
Yeah,
was a big
Boardman's
urban
was
renewal.
here.
Then it became a bank.
Yeah,
Bank.
that's the building immediately north of the railroad.
Got it. Okay.
The one that's now empty and free rent or for sale or whatever it is. I think. Well, what is it? But it's 27. Yeah, so the canal is not an issue here.
Right.
The canal is out in the river at this point. So this would have been more rail related than.
Right. So they had already filled it.
This is all closed.
They had already filled it up by that point. Yeah.
That whole thing, would be completely filled in.
Right. This was all not there. Yeah. What year are these maps?
1876.
1870. Okay. So the Livingston Ave Bridge would have been in at that point, right?
Yeah, well, that's here.
Right. Yep.
In fact, I think it might be fairly new.
I think that was
at this point.
1862, 61.
Is it that
Yeah,
early?
yeah, because I
Are
remember.
you sure that's that one and not the Maiden Lane Bridge?
I think it's Livingston Ave.
Okay.
I'm-
When
Maiden Lane
Lane is
is
older. Okay, that's 66.
Yeah.
the one that opens up right after
Yeah.
the Civil War.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Troy blocked it and blocked it for years and years
Mm.
because they had the only, and it was impossible to do during the Civil War. It would be unpatriotic.
So you crossed on ferries.
Right. Yeah.
But for Lincoln's funeral in Albany, you know, they'd have to go all the way up to Troy and then come all the way back.
Hmm.
You know, 66 we opened up ours. I don't, is our railroad 80 in the 80s? The one that's still there?
What's that?
The place where you get your boat in.
Oh
Rail
yeah.
Road.
Yeah, that's
the one that's to be
yeah,
replaced.
that's right here. Yeah. So yeah.
I think it's around the 80s.
Yeah.
Certainly
The-
the foundation of it is.
Do you think the warehouse had an impact? Like, what kind of impact did it have on this part of the city? Like, just being there. You know what I mean? I think.
Probably it's too late to have an impact.
Hmm.
You know, because I think some of these industrial concerns are
Already
really
built.
on the
Mhm.
wane.
Yeah.
And
It was just an addition to that.
yeah,
Yeah.
some of the you know, in a lot of these, you know, you see there are major stove companies here. Okay, so Quinn and Nolan is Schaefer. Rathbone is that? Yeah, Rathbone. This is a big stove manufacturing company.
Heavy industry.
Yeah, heavy industries. There was another section down in the south end near where the port is now. So, but this was, you know, industrial district on the riverfront. You know, you could see there were rail yards, different kinds of things. You know, and this is interesting as far as the way things were mixed in. You know, this is what everybody touts as the new urbanism, you know, the mix of uses and all that stuff,
Yeah.
which looks a lot like the old urbanism.
Right.
Because here's a school, or no, here's St. Peter's Hospital, a school, you know, rail yards, lumber yards, eventually the warehouse, and then all these residences are all mixed in.
Right. In between.
The family home from my grandmother's family was on 72 North Lansing Street, which is right there.
You're kidding. That's right across from the firehouse.
Well, and his job was that he worked down here. He was the stationary engineer for the big equipment that took things off the boats, brought them back on and
Yeah.
on. And his employer was Erastus Corning and New York Central.
Wow. That's.
And Corning wouldn't hire people unless they had temperance pledges,
Hmm.
because he was not a prohibitionist, but close to it.
The time that the warehouse was put in, you mentioned here at this point, it had a lot of, you know, mixed uses, a lot of different things. What did Albany look like at that time? You talk about the stores, you know, the time that it was coming into its own.
You know, down. What's all?
Was doing well.
Yeah, down. Yeah, because the 20s were good. I mean, if you look at, you know, the building records, or, you know, a tremendous amount of building in the first 30 years of the 20th century. The city, you know, the industries are still expanding, I think, and trolley lines are expanding. So there's a lot of development uptown, but all of the heavy employment is downtown. You know, and the commercial district. You know, here's, you know, downtown is you know, half a mile that way, or actually here's Clinton Avenue. So the big downtown starts here.
Yeah.
So this was very close to the commercial center of the city as well as being the industrial center. But it's always intrigued me to think that the palace is here. Let's see, Palace is right there, and you could walk to the palace from residential areas, you know, that are a 5-minute walk.
Yeah.
And you'd see that this residential area went, you know, all the way up to, you know, and this is filled in with, you know, Niagara Mohawk and all that stuff. But, you know,
The Van Wart Street
densely.
came up this way, so like a little bit. The number of people that you can name prominently who are all Van Wart Street people, Mel Wolfgang,
Yeah.
Fitzgerald,
Yeah.
Yeah, this is like an
Radigan's.
Because I was going to ask, is it working class?
Yeah,
Was it
yeah,
a
working
sprawl of?
Yeah, and that
Blue collar, and educating their children so that they're hanging on to the neighborhood there even when after they
Right.
get an education. You can still see all the little houses here. A lot of them were there, and around right after World War II, this became the first urban renewal project, and they demolished a lot of these houses, and the city alderman who was there took great offense, and at some point Dick Connors told me that story. He was there at the time, had just gotten out of service. And at one point, they talked about slum clearance. And he stood up and he said, "Who are you calling my neighborhood a slum? There are more crucifixes in the rooms of those houses down by the basin than there are in all of Pine Hill."
yeah, and this is also what you're seeing here is a change in the socioeconomic status of these neighborhoods because here's Pembroke Street, which from the Civil War, from shortly before the Civil War to probably about 1910, was one of the very fine places to live. And these buildings here, I found a photograph of them and I wish I remembered where it was because I have a childhood recollection of going by them on the bus and then seeing this photograph. They were fine Greek revival houses from the 1840s. So the city at this time,
Four still
they're going, yeah, exactly. Those four are right here. But you could see how dense that was. And I was in the building right here before it got torn down, and it was incredible. So it was, and somewhere here, can't remember which building it is, but was somebody, what's the whole story? Somebody who was in the booth with Lincoln at the time of assassination lived in this block.
One of the Rathbones?
No, it was a senator or something. It was really bizarre. Yeah, Harris. Yeah, that was the name. And that house, I've seen plenty of photographs of that. Probably one of the most spectacular houses in the city when it was built. Just the way, what again, this is kind of indicative of everything that happens there. Everything starts at the river.
Yeah.
And then moving up the hill
Yeah.
is what people want to do. So these houses, which were really fine houses at the time they were built, by 100 years later, by 1940, they were not so desirable, even though architecturally they were
Subdivided.
Right. They were created initially for a purpose, and then that kind of changed. Yeah.
And and everybody wanted to live downtown. It was still, the place where you wanted to settle. And I've even seen pictures of stuff. What's that, Colony? Yeah, like in this Livingston, where is that? Like we put it like that. This whole block where Cap Rep is. This was, just really, oh no, that's Broadway, I'm sorry. Here on North Pearl, these were fine buildings, and built as single family houses. I mean, some of the things that, Washington Square in New York City, that's the same period as this. So obviously on a much smaller scale in the sense of numbers, not in the sense of, architectural scale.
Right.
They're very similar in quality to what was there, built around the same time, and pretty much like forgotten. I don't even think people realize how spectacular those blocks were. And so, but on the other hand, you had, industrial uses creeping in.
Right.
So that made them less desirable, and that's one of the things, like, for example, transportation allows land use separation. So, if you're moving up the hill, you still have the ability to get to your place of business
Right.
down on the riverfront because there's transportation.
Right.
And, the people didn't live next door to their foundries anymore, or the breweries,
Right.
whatever,
Right.
and
They could go farther. Yeah.
yeah, that's something that really started, I think, in earnest around the time of the Civil War, where you wanted to live in a residential area and you wanted to, move up and show your status because you had a successful industry of some sort. Rathbone didn't live down by the stove foundry, if you lived down in Kenwood, which is the
Right.
place that burned.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and that was
that's
right. You know, that's the way things were done.
the reason that St. Peter's Hospital went here was because of the number of industrial accidents that occurred. And they weren't going to go way over there, it'd be too expensive. We wanted to be here where all of their people were.
Kind of built-in clientele.
Right,
you know,
yeah.
Industrial
Yeah.
accidents or whatever.
But more before we go, because I know David's got to run. One thing you said earlier about this part of the river, and then when the warehouse went in of it, at that point it was, and it was into this was all filled in.
Yeah.
I do find it interesting that there's a big. I guess it hasn't. It's been a very long time since it was really connected to the canal, the river, and so forth because of the industrial development. I know that that's been the latest push is to reconnect it with the river, but it feels like that's been since a century, right? Since it's really been connected, if you will, in this way, right? Like that just kind of.
Yeah, this part of the canal was abandoned in the 19 teens.
Okay.
But all these industrial uses stayed. You know, if you saw this whole map spread out all the way down towards where the port is now, you would see that the river was entirely populated by industry.
Right.
Some of the photographs that I have of the lower part, the eastern end of, kind of like where the U-Haul building is.
Yeah.
There were residences right down to the river in the 18 teens and 20s that by 100 years later, some of those many of the residents on
Time of Civil War,
some of them
your industry.
Converted
Right.
houses that were small industries.
Right.
Like tobacco factories were like upstairs in a house. But there were plenty of those down there. When you see that, you can look at those photographs and look at the maps that compare to them and see how everything is moving away from the river. And also, the river was like, who wanted it?
Right.
It was polluted.
Right.
It was smelly. And you didn't need it because you just went over it. I mean, I think I grew up near Watervliet, and I think the first time I was on the river was on a boat tour in 1977, and I was 25 years old almost by then. So, like, oh.
Right. Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Or that view, right, of the cities, and you go down the east side. Yeah.
Yeah. But by that time, so many changes had taken place that the river was, even 50 years earlier in the 1920s, it still had the characteristic of being, very much present. I have a friend that runs a website called Hear About Here, and I worked with him on putting together a tour. And when I showed him the pictures where in the Pastures neighborhood, every east-west street had a view of the river. And now, like when you look down South Ferry or Herkimer, Westerlo, all you see is the highway.
Right.
And
Or at one point, or I guess you saw the warehouse. If you go up, there, up Livingston, or
this is much bigger than anything down there.
Right.
So you're going to see this from a lot of places.
Yeah.
And you see it from 787, obviously.
Right.
That's probably why it's so much in the public consciousness, because it's like, and it's kind of a weird looking building. I mean, this that Toronto
that was nice.
it's quite a bit different. What they did there was they put windows in.
Right.
And the
I know.
building, and that I'm sure those windows were all new.
Yeah.
The nature of the building was that it didn't have windows.
Right.
Or it had the slit windows like it has now.
Yeah.
Because there
was a lot of windows in the refrigerator.
No, you don't need them, right? Well, probably sometimes it probably wasn't effective as a. No, right? Because it was, like you said, it was for not convenience, but it was more for.
Yeah, I mean, if you ever looked at a brewery in its original condition, they didn't have windows at certain parts of the brewery as well.
Yeah.
And it really had to do, and that's typical enough. The function of the building is what dictates what it looks like. Especially too in this period where, everything is what you're supposed to be able to tell what it is by what it looks like.
Yeah.
You know, you're not going to put fancy decoration on a cold storage warehouse.
Right.
You know, so it doesn't have any.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's because of the way it functioned.